only black newspaper in Greater New Haven. It's about almost 40 years old. And I'm on the air every day on WNHH from 9 to 11, so tune in 103.5.
And I'm Stacey Gillette. I work at the intersection of like online nonprofit news, kind of building audience and tech, and book publishing. So I come at the arts from a tiny little point, just trying to relate to that.
So we're going to introduce the panel. Jasmine Hughes, come on down. Jasmine is a graduate of Hillhouse High School and ECA.
I'm no longer in New Haven. Well, how many ECA were you?
Yes, Lord have mercy, 70,000 years ago. She's a story editor and feature writer of the New York Times Magazine.
I'm just a writer.
Just a writer? Not just a writer. Glory writer of the New York Times. And she has written penetrating, revealing, and fun profiles of celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg, Viola Davis, Questlove, Little Nas X, and Kalela?
Oh, Kalela.
I
forgot about her.
I don't know. I'm still listening to Marvin Gaye. I know Marvin Gaye, that's what I know. And so she won, this year she won an Ellie Profile Writing Award from the American Society of Magazine Editors for deeply observed portraits of major cultural figures that reveal their subjects with insight and humor.
Wow, way to go.
Oh, I know.
You should keep going.
I know we were going to take turns.
Okay, we can take turns. Next up, we have Khalifa Saneh. Is it Saneh? Saneh. New Yorker staff writer and previously covered rock and roll, hip hop, and pop music for the New York Times. Penguin Press in 2021 published his book Major Labels: A History of Popular Music in 7 Genres. Please buy books. He's an alum of, among other groups, a TiVo cover band. When he was 14, his mother chaperoned him to a Ramones concert at Toad's Place.
Wow. Cool mom. Hannah. Oh, Hannah! Oh, my Lord, it took me a minute to sort of process this. Hannah Goldfield. Girl, I remember you was a Hannah Goldfield is a food critic and feature writer for The New Yorker. She grew up in New Haven, woohoo! Graduated from Wilbercross High School and ECA, yay! And she decided she wanted to become a restaurant critic at 10 years old after watching Julia Roberts star as a lovelorn reviewer in My Best Friend's Wedding.
That was your takeaway.
I love it! Girl after my own heart.
Welcome, Hannah. And Brian Sutton, I didn't get to say hi, has served as the arts editor of the New Haven Independent since 2013 and is helping to oversee the launch of the Review Crew, a published science fiction author. He regularly covers a wide range of local arts events from music to theater to visual art. He also teaches music and regularly records and performs as a musician. Brian Slattery.
Hey!
And let me just say this, Brian and I are co-creators of Jazz where we sort of have music, jazz in the most interesting places. And before the pandemic shut us down, we were having a good run of having musicians play jazz in places that you wouldn't ordinarily find jazz being played. So, because he and I, every time we get together, we sit down and we drink, and we're thinking, we should have a bar. So this satisfies us not jumping into buying a damn bar. So. That's my mirror. Lots of things to be said at 11 o'clock at night. So welcome, y'all.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get started, Stace.
Let's go. So, Hannah, we know what inspired you to get into reviewing. Just kick it off with the rest of us. What made you realize that this was kind of the important area to kind of focus on in
Let's start a lot.
Oh, me first.
I think like a lot of us, like it's not like the only thing that you've ever thought about writing about. But for a while, it was difficult to find opportunities to write about the arts. When I first moved to town, I worked for the Advocate all weekly, and I did either the like public policy pieces that nobody else wanted to do, or when they discovered that I like was a musician, they'd send me out to do art stories. And I've always thought that the arts were just a really important part of publications, of any publications, you know, way of reflecting the place that they report about. Like when I first took the job at the Independent, like when we talked during our first interview, the idea was that the arts were a way to sort of tell you what the city was doing when it wasn't having like, you know, like a problem with its sewage system, or when there wasn't a fight with the landlord, or when there wasn't, you know, or when it wasn't just City Hall, like, you know, hashing out a major policy problem. It's also sort of getting at the idea that there's like there's a vibrant culture that people are taking part in, and it's what they're doing when they're like not at work. And like that kind of thing is pretty important. You know, in a place like New Haven, I think that the difference between having the arts coverage and not having the arts coverage is that we see that New Haven is like a active, vibrant place, and like whether it's working on its problems or whether it's just enjoying itself. And I think it just contributes to people's sense that the place that they live in is worth paying attention to. And that it's not all bad news. And that the arts are a way of like expressing some of those problems, you know, and helping clarify what's going on. And that mission has felt deeply important in ways that I did not appreciate when I first started working at the Independent. And it's only grown richer over 10 years. So I'm afraid I'm maybe a lifer.
Add to your origin story.
I could add to it. Yeah, I mean, my inspiration was much more selfish than that. I think because I was so young and I just, you know, someone in elementary school told me I was a good writer and I loved food, and then I realized from that movie truly that it was a job, and I was like, well, there we go. Those are bringing together these two incredible things, and I don't know, I just always wanted to do it. And then of course all those reasons too, and I love to read, and I've always loved magazines and newspapers, and I just love, I think the arts are they're so important to me personally, and it's just simply how you find out about things that bring you immense pleasure. It's simple for me.
For me, I cared about music before I cared about journalism. When I was a kid living here in New Haven, I was obsessed with punk rock. That was my whole world. And that's a very like argumentative world, so the idea of like arguing about music made a lot of sense to me. And then as I kind of got back immersed into hip hop, that sort of inspired me in a different way, because it was, unlike punk rock, it was so popular, and I felt like it wasn't being written about, or wasn't being written about well. And so I felt like I could make the argument that even if you don't care about this music, or even if you're never going to listen to any of this stuff, you might be happier for knowing about it. And so that's always kind of been my approach, partly because of the outlets I work at. I was at the Times, now I'm at the New Yorker. So I've never been at a place where I would assume that readers are going to care about whatever weird thing I'm into. And so the fun of it is to explain, like, here's something that you need to know about, or you enjoy knowing about, even if it's not something that you personally like. And I've always liked, I'm not really a reviewer in a strict sense anymore, though I do some of that now. But I like music as a way to encounter unusual, unexpected, offensive perspectives, and to kind of think about them and grapple with them. And so I like that, especially music has such a low barrier to entry that any kid can make a track and upload it, and it can become a whole thing. So I like music as a way to get readers to encounter stuff that maybe they otherwise wouldn't encounter, or think was interesting, or think was good.
When I was at ECA, I graduated in 2008. I was a dance major. I was like taken my modern classes, I'm taking my ballet classes, I'm taking my tap classes, and then at the beginning of senior year, when it came time for all of my dance teachers to write my recommendations, I got for the common application, I got my application back, and on the paper, it said, Jasmine is one of the finest writers to ever come through this program. Nothing. And so then I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I should be doing. And then when I went to college, I started to figure out what am I writing about, what I'm interested in. And it turns out the only thing I was really interested in was myself. And I wrote a lot of my personal essays and things. And then once I graduated and I started working, I wrote about myself, but then I got hit with the idea, or the realization rather, that people would read it and respond to it, and I was like, I don't want my business out on the screen anymore, but what I can do is put other people's business out. And they make the mistake of talking to me. I was homeschooled until into the 5th grade, and I think a recurring theme in my life, or the neuroses that most motivates me is this fear that I'm not normal, right? That I missed out on some sort of normalization that happens to every American child in the 2nd and 3rd grade, but because I was in my Christian homeschool in Camden, Connecticut, I missed that. And so when I started coming out with a career and figuring out what I wanted to write about, I realized I just wanted to write about people and this enduring question, what is normal? Am I it? Can someone move towards it? And then I just ended up writing about people who do the things that I'm interested in. I don't know how to do math, so I don't write about business or the economy. I don't know how to drive, so I don't really write about everyone who knows how to do that either. But I do write largely about entertainment figures just because as the question of normalcy starts to cohere into something sharper, the real question I'm trying to consider when I'm doing my profiles of these artists and entertainers is why does everything like you? What makes you so special? And what are you providing to the larger culture? And what conversations are you starting? And that's been really fulfilling for me for the past 2 years.
So let me ask, is there an appetite for the kind of writing that you do? Do you know that there's an appetite for it? And what do you think the state of the kind of writing that y'all do is in at the moment?
There for the Swiss
I go hard, girl.
I think increasingly no. So the Time Sunday magazine, I like to think my specialty is a 5,000 to 7,000 word profile about a black star. And it's really fun, but it's relatively narrow. And I think that as the internet changes and the social media changes and the way that we get information changes, people's attention spans are a little more taut than usual. And I think as the news budgets start to shrink, one of the easiest things you can start to get rid of is saving your fucking writer to Italy and having people to do that, right? And so I feel very lucky to do my job, especially at one of the last institutions with the resources to do it well. So I don't think there's an appetite, but I think there's an appreciation once that work is made. What I like the most in my responses, the responses I've received to stories that I've done, is just oh, I didn't know this about this person who's been in the public eye forever. I wrote a story about Judge Judy, who's had the highest rated TV show in primetime TV for 15 years, and there was just, there was this whole world that I tapped into and writing about her. People really appreciated that too. So I think that there's less room, but I like to think that people don't necessarily want it, but they appreciate it in front of them.
Food critics? Because I watch some food shows,
Yeah.
and I've watched shows that have food critics in them, and I'm fascinated, like you, by that world.
Yeah.
I'm a chef by trade, and I like to eat. So, we're souls to spit.
Yeah.
And also, you asked a question about appetite, and that should
Yeah, I find that question hard to answer because it's. I mean, Jasmine kind of spoke to, it's unclear. It's like newspapers are obviously not doing well. Print journalism in general is not doing well. I still want it. I still have such an appetite for it. I'm in my 30s. I feel like, at least in my world, my friends want it, my family wants it. It does seem like the broader world is saying this is not a priority, or at least the people who are making the decisions at the highest levels. I want to say yes. I want to feel hopeful about it and keep doing it no matter what, which is exactly what we're all doing here, I think. So I think there's enough of an appetite for it, and I think we should just carry on as if there is an appetite for it. I mean, food seems like it's become such a bigger part of kind of mainstream culture in the last 20 years. Specifically in terms of like food criticism, everyone says like, well, I mean, a lot of, as Jasmine said, arts coverage is the first step to get cut. There are very few food critics left in the country, even in New York. In Toronto, which is one of like the greatest restaurant cities in North America, if not the world, there's not a single food critic, which is very sad. But I do, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The general journalism stuff, the rise of websites like Yelp and Google reviews, and everyone's a critic, and we don't need like official criticism to figure out if somewhere is worth eating. Although I don't know if you can do, because if you every time I read a Yelp page, it's like so clear that there's like total like just like psychos, right? Yelp reviews. So
People should be reading the Psychos book magazine.
we said psychos as a point of view.
So Yelp with an editor.
Yeah, they were an editor, exactly. Yelp review is just
Credentialed.
Yelp review, they all had like an axe to grind. They had a really bad experience. They just never seemed to.
The axe grinding to professionals.
Exactly. So I don't know. I don't have a clear answer, but I'm gonna just continue to operate as an appetite for it.
I'm like, it's funny. When I hear you talk, I feel so much more agnostic because like the desire to be a critic was to me it was formed by the fact that the industry exists. In other words, the only reason I wanted to write about music in the New York Times or write essays in the New Yorker is because those things existed when I was growing up, and I was like, oh, that's a place where you can have an opinion or make an argument or have some sort of encounter with something. If that conversation is like moving to some other thing, if that conversation is moving to like documentaries or podcasts or whatever, like, I don't know, that to me that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because to me, like, people want to have these conversations, and the form that these conversations take is maybe slightly less important.
Sounds like you have a bunch of different skills, and Hannah and I
I definitely do feel fairly literate sometimes when I'm talking to Hannah and others of my colleagues. People going home and reading novels for fun.
I mean, from where I'm sitting, that question is the one that like the review crew has bet the farm on, right? it's the reason that we're all here. Like we're trying to figure out whether there's an appetite. I think at the national level, that question is really difficult to ascertain. I mean, I'm not even sure that we can talk about a national culture anymore. It doesn't. Like, what is U.S. national culture? I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't even.
It's Taylor and Drake.
I mean, is there anything to say about it to the extent that it exists at all? I think from the point of view of like a local reporter, I can tell you that the feedback that I have gotten from the place that I live is that like this type of reporting is like a part of the little wheel that makes the culture go around. People make stuff and we tell people about it, and then that helps people find out about it, and it makes a difference. I don't doubt that is effective. I don't think it's effective in terms of number of clicks, or that you would gauge it on sort of like audience, even like the sizes of audiences. Like sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big. But I get a lot of feedback about how people really like it. For what it's worth, I also get a lot of feedback from people in neighboring towns. When I'm a musician, so I get to go around other places, and I'm constantly asking them what their towns are like. And a lot of them wish they had some sort of local coverage. They'll say like, yeah, I'm working really hard on this thing, I just don't even know how to let people know about it. And there are a lot of towns where there's a really good art scene, and it's difficult for them to connect with their audience because they just don't have, the little wheel is broken. There's a little spoke peeking out of it, and it doesn't spin unless you have all the spokes.
Isn't that partly a business model question? Like, in other words,
For sure.
like it seems like traditionally in media you had like in the advertiser supported model, your most important customer is the one who cares the least, because you're maximizing eyeballs, and so you're trying to get casual readers, casual browsers. You're talking about the importance of this coverage to the people for whom it matters the most, which traditionally has often meant a more subscriber model, because it's a small. Because then your most valuable customer is the one who really cares and is willing to pay. And I think being caught between those two things, as our publication kind of shifted over the time I was there from being more advertiser supported to being more subscriber supported, I think in a certain way, and sometimes in subtle ways, that can kind of shape the coverage and shape what it is that we think we're doing.
No, it's true. And I think that there's, when we start talking about national stuff, we're also basically talking about the art industry, right? Like not the creation of culture or the creation of art, but we're talking about the like capitalist mechanism that's like putting that stuff out there. And I think that it's like kind of important to think about that like the mechanisms that we have all been living under for our entire lives are actually not that much older than we are. Like the music industry is about 100 years old. People have been making music for 10,000 years. It's not. These ideas about like whether the arts are collapsing, we have to make sure that we dissociate them from like how the industry is doing, like how the enterprise is doing. And I think that there's, the people who talk about it in crisis are mostly talking about the fact that you can't make money the way that you used to. So it's really just about money, not about art. And the question of how to make money doing art has been with artists since there have been artists. I don't think that they're that worried about it. Like I was just driving here thinking about like the characters in Midsummer Night's Dream, the community theater people. They all have day jobs. Like that existed a long time ago. I mean, musicians have always had day jobs, and it's only like for a brief period of about 40 years, from about 1960 to 2000, that you can even think about doing it full time. And like now, I think it's just reverted back, and it's not necessarily that it's so bad. And part of me as a working musician wouldn't it be all that sad to see the entire industry collapse. It's just who knows what we'll come up with after that. I don't know. But like, how good has the industry really been to its artists? How good has any of these industries been to the artists? And we're living in a kind of interesting time where we get to really ask those fundamental questions about what the hell those industries are really doing, and what purpose they really serve in like creating culture and identity for people who want.
Which ties back to news, right? Because like we're the favorite whipping post, being the arts section. Anytime there's a budget cut, and so those have been cut, and that actually didn't help. Like papers are still collapsing, right? And so like that too needs to be rebuilt. So when you're talking about like having only one skill, clearly you have many, but I feel like if there is not an appetite because people are like rage clicking on Yelp or like thumbs downing something that they hate, like maybe you recreate that appetite because that culture also has kind of fallen apart, right? So I think that I almost feel like it is our moral imperative as people who can think critically to re-energize community and culture and news through this kind of work. So please don't stop doing it. Find other ways to get paid. Get some dishwashing done.
So talk to me about the times that we're in dictates what we see in the news and what is written. How much of it influences what's going on in the moment, determines what you write about. And do you ever have to sort of pivot from something that you're working on to something that has much more, has the attention of the country, the world, the region, whatever?
Maybe I've been in it. I don't even know what it would mean for those things to be separate. Like, I'm always thinking about, like, well, what's an interesting story to tell? And that's always going to be, that's always going to be partly inspired by, like, what's going on, but also, like, by what people are interested in, by what stories are already being told by other people. So where's, like, a place I think I can fit in with an interesting story that's not being told. So, yeah, but it's always, it sounds very old school. Like, I think of myself as, like, I'm creating some content for people that will hopefully consume what I read and enjoy it. So in that sense, it's like, it almost feels like a service business to me, and I'm trying to figure out, like, it's not like I'm sitting at home writing something just to get it off my chest and then, like, putting it in my little drawer by my bed. Like, I'm working and I'm trying to tell stories that are interesting and that maybe resonate in an interesting way. So it's always affected by what's going on all the time. Does that seem, do you think about that?
No, I think I'm the total opposite. I'm always like, I'm interested in this person, in this very like narrow space that they occupy. And as I report, that space widens and it widens and it widens. And like, usually in a profile I'm trying to do, not even like my net graph, but my like analysis, like the criticism, you might say. That's the stuff I do at the very, very end once I like have all the pieces there. Because I think I'm very like people oriented, and it's much easier for me to like tackle something singularly. I also tend to write about people with really long careers, and so there are these interesting ways in which their careers can like bend to fit the moment at hand, or maybe they're like going against it, right? About Whoopi Goldberg, but I don't like. I wish I were more of a writer like that to say like, hey, Bad Bunny is really, really popular. I wonder if that means that we're like, and there are a bunch of other artists coming from the Caribbean who are collaborating with rappers and other people in hip hop, and I wonder if I could tell a story about that through this person. That's the sort of writer I want to be. I mostly just choose people I want to talk to.
But I think part of that is a skill that probably you have so deep that you don't even realize you have it, which is having interesting taste. And having good, like, in other words, the fact that I don't really need a nut graph. The fact that you find someone interesting, I'm like, I'm in for 6,000 words. Like, I want to read about that.
You should come back to the New York Times and tell that.
It didn't go so well when I tried to explain that on my own behalf. But that's part of the job, right? Is to be like, is to be interested in interesting things, right? Because there are some other people who'd be like, I'm really interested in this person, and me and you would listen to that other person and be like, nah.
Hannah, on our way here, Hannah drove me here from Announcer Drive because the New Haven City bus system is really good. We were talking about the list of black-owned restaurants that you were like maintaining during summer 2020, which was like not at all your job, but also like squarely within your interests, so to say. And I wonder, if I may I wonder how you feel about food, which is such a global political.
Well, that's what I think. I think for me, it's much more explicitly driven by exactly what you're saying, by what's happening in the moment, because I think food ends up being this kind of like arena of identity in a way that's I think probably more so than music and other forms of entertainment. Not that music isn't also a form of expressing identity, but food. It's just so much more clearly like my food represents my culture, and there's been a huge reckoning in terms of that in the last few years, and in terms of the idea of inclusivity and what kind of restaurants get coverage and what kind of chefs get coverage, what kind of food gets coverage, and so that has been a huge part of how decided what to write about. Starting before 2020, but definitely in 2020, there were just like, because of the Black Lives Matter movement, there was just a huge shift where like it was like things that people had been sort of like dancing around were just being said very clearly. Like, and yeah, there was a period of time where people started to compile lists of Black-owned businesses, and I and another food writer made a Excel spreadsheet or like a Google Excel sheet of Black-owned restaurants, and we opened it to anyone who wanted to contribute to it, and we have this really long list going. But yeah, it's always something I'm trying to, until recently I was writing a weekly restaurant review, and a huge part of my strategizing was like, am I covering a wide enough mix of places? Am I like, have I written, has it been a while since I've written about a Mexican restaurant? What about other Latin American cuisines? How many, like making sure that I'm covering the whole city and giving everyone the same kind of platform beyond price point and neighborhood, and just trying to tell the story of the city through restaurants.
And do you get hyped up about Michelin stars? And do you get hyped up about the James Beard stuff? And who's not on those lists and who is not?
I mean, I'm like, awards are great. Sometimes they're given to the people who deserve them, but like all that stuff. I mean, the Michelin thing as a whole, like it's all so.
But then when it came out about race, though, and how many Black people had been left out of that.
Well, it's all pay for play, and it's all like you literally, like, to get awards, you have to apply. I think a lot of people don't realize this. You apply and pay money to be considered. Like, I didn't realize that until kind of recently. And so, yeah, I try not to. I try to ignore that stuff, and I think I'm not alone in this at all. But I think there in food criticism in particular, like you can see it through the work of P. Wells, who's the restaurant critic for the Times. He started to kind of shift the idea of what a 4-star, or 3 stars. I think 3 is most you can get. 4, yeah. Anyway, he gave 3 or 4 stars to a like a shack basically in the Bronx that was serving like Puerto Rican food made on over like a wood fire, which was like no one has ever done that before, and he's also giving 3 stars or 4 stars, I really should know this, to Le Bernardin, which is the fanciest French restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. So I think there's been like kind of a broad shift toward that, and I definitely try to stay kind of current in that.
But how do you think about POV? Like you're talking about, when you think about like covering the whole city,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's cuisines you think are overrated and cuisines you think are underrated. Like I'm sure you have a view.
Yeah, well, I mean,
You're not neutral.
I'm not neutral, but I try to be, yeah, you can't be objective. There's no such thing as objectivity in criticism. I try to, orient myself in such a way that I'm like sharing what I've learned and making clear my perspective, as opposed to saying this is the best, whatever. I'm like, here is a restaurant you can go to, and here is what you can eat there, and here is the context for this restaurant in New York City. It's the only, Bhutanese restaurant in Elmhurst, and here is, broadly speaking, what people eat in Bhutan, and here's the story of how the owners of this restaurant met and decided to open a restaurant. So it is criticism, and I share, whether or not I like things, but I try never to. It's never only opinion. It's always I try to contextualize it as much as I can.
You don't have to tell me.
public service
Do
thing.
you think there's a cuisine that's overrated?
Well, I think in general.
You don't have to say what it is, but deep down.
Doesn't leave this room. No, I think that like in general, European food and like French food has taken up too much space. Like, why is French food considered to be the apex of cuisine? I think that's pretty much bullshit. I like it a lot. I think French food is great, and really good French food is incredible. But so is really good Szechuan food, so it's really good Afro-Caribbean food. I just think, so overrated just in terms of like knowing the, like, pay attention.
Make sure everybody sends their remarks to Paul Bass.
What were you saying about public service?
Goals feels. Oh, it would be embarrassing for you if you just covered like French and European and New American restaurants in Midtown, right? Like it would be embarrassment for you. It would be embarrassing for your publication, and people would be like mad at you if you wouldn't have that job for much longer.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your job, or any of our jobs, do you guys ever look at other arts coverage and feel like you're plugging in holes? Like I feel like you were sort of talking a little bit about this with places that wish they had more arts coverage, these towns that you're traveling to. Like Hannah, for example, do you read like what Pete Wells writes and you're like, this motherfucker runs another French restaurant?
No,
my
because
head out.
he's like, I can see him scrambling to do the same thing
What about New York Magazine?
that I was doing. Well, I
What
think
about
they have a
Peter?
different, I think they have a different goal. I think they're more like, New York Magazine, I think they, in terms of the restaurant coverage, I think they want to be covering like what's cool as opposed to, you know,
They're more servicey.
they're more
Yeah.
servicey and they're more like, I mean, they're like both the arbiters of cool and the crown pillars of it. So I think they're like, what's hot, like, what are, I mean, as much as you can say that anything is cool, but like, what's sort of, you know, on the tip of everyone's tongue right now, whereas I think the Times is trying to be more like a publication of the people, and I don't think
How are you
anyone
doing?
would call it the publication of the people, but I think some people there fancy themselves as trying to do that.
It's a publication of 8
It's
people.
So Brian, do you want to jump in here and answer whatever the question was before it went down a whole other lane?
Okay, I was trying to get the bad mouth.
Oh, right. I remember what the question was. That was the long
That's so long ago.
pause for space. Yeah, I mean, around here, like, I mean, New Haven is a politically active place. So I think that the question of having a pivot hasn't really come up because I think that the art scene here very often reflects what's on people's minds. You know, it hasn't been hard to find art stories that that connect to the issues that people are talking about, generally speaking. If anything, I've tried to make sure that that's not all I cover. I think that there's still a lot to be said for making sure that people just don't think of art as merely political commentary. That that there are people who write songs about their mom, and there are people who like make paintings of what they see out their bedroom window. And I try really hard to make sure that those things are represented also, because I think that the question of whether political art has lasting value both beyond that political moment, that's always an open thing. And we should be careful to make sure that we don't just have it be about just that, because artists, you imagine culture is about the expression of all of human experience. It's a daunting thing when I have 5 stories to write and 100 possibilities. that's more of the problem, is that there's way more things than I'll ever have time or energy or brain space to do.
But the dirty secret in this room, right, is that a lot of times those stories are easier to pitch. Like, I can't tell you how many editors have come to me to be like, why don't we do something on protesters? Like, those stories are often the easiest stories to sell, which often, obviously, is one of the things that shapes what gets covered.
Yeah, I mean, at least like right now they are, right?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see in 10 years if there's any appetite for that kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, it doesn't about social problems.
Yeah, it's fashion. It is fashion.
Yeah,
So,
look, like in the 90s, nobody wanted to hear about stuff like that, right? They're like, ooh, too political. Like that, too political was a problem, was an art problem, like not that long ago. And we don't know if it will be a problem again.
And it's funny that you're talking about like multiple markets at once, right? You're talking about the art market in terms of whether they're selling. There's the like high art market, which is sometimes separate from the stuff that's selling for a lot of money. There's the market of journalism, where we're trying to sell articles about art. So sometimes in these parallel markets, different things are valued.
So, knowing that the newspaper industry, the journalism industry is an industry, how do you position yourselves to stay relevant, to get paid, and to continue to do this work and pay your daggone rent? How do you do that?
I mean, I feel as if with my job and making it sure that it's clean, like getting a job to be your chance to really getting tenure, you know? Like, I'm gonna get fired. I'm supposed to be at work right now, but get fired.
Not all those awards.
Not my one shining award. I'm incredibly grateful for that, right? Like, I love money. I love to get paid, and I love to be able to pay my bills, but I do wonder sometimes if that makes me lazy, editorially lazier, because I'm not as, because my job is such a sure thing, again, not on one, what if I got fired at the end of the day? Then I know that, like, I feel maybe not quite a confidence that the stories will come, but more of an understanding, like, I gotta write something because this is my job. Whereas I think 10 years ago, before I was at the Times and I was freelancing a lot, like, I was thinking so much more about how to make myself relevant, both in how I positioned myself and who I was giving drinks with and all that stuff, and also like the sorts of stories I was pitching and like, you know, really trying to establish a tone and a zone of interest and everything for myself. I think now, for like, I think the best way to establish yourself and I mean, what I want to say is, like, don't work in journalism. Like, have a day job so that you can pay your bills and so that you don't have to sort of, like, completely give yourself over to the industry, which, like, any sort of artistic or creative industry will squeeze you up and chew you up and spit you out and does not get crap about it, right? And I think the way that I would try to make myself stand apart now is to only write about the things I really care about, the things that take time to, and not just like write the file or write in exchange for money. And that's why I think that getting a day job is such a good idea. It's honestly what I would be doing now, so that the things that I'm writing are things that I care about, are things that I can stand on, that I can speak to, that will hopefully lead to other opportunities, and not just like a bunch of aggregate blog posts that I got for $150 a pop because I need to pay for it.
And I think related to that is that even if you have like your dream job in journalism, it doesn't pay all that well compared to like other stuff, compared to like marketing or advertising or something.
We have so many friends who have left journalism and they're rich now.
I think one lesson to draw from that I always try to keep in mind is like this job doesn't pay well enough for me to lie about something or for me to hype something up that I'm not really excited about. If I wanted to just like put out copy praising something that deep down I didn't really love, I'd go try to get some real money. And so like,
there are a lot of copywriting jobs out there.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of really
Like,
well-paying
startup
addicts who work in this
yeah. And so because of that,
yeah.
but I'm always a little bit baffled, whether it's arts journalism or something else, where I read someone writing something and I'm like, I don't think you really wrote that. I don't think that's really happening. I don't think you're really telling the truth.
And then
about
you're
how
like
you
sort
feel.
of diluting your byline, or at least
Right.
attaching a story that you may not necessarily be proud of in exchange for $200.
Right.
Because you need that money, but it's not, you're not necessarily doing the work that you really want to do.
And often, it might often turn out that if you did tell the truth, you may need to be doing better because there's a lot of outlets now, there are a lot of places you can go, and so...
Are there a lot of outlets?
Well, not outlets like publications, but there's a lot of hustles, there's a lot of ways to make money outside of those publications, and you can get fired and like do something else, and if it's passionate and it seems like you're telling the truth...
I feel like I'm getting all the inside. All the inside tea.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like the gig economy is for now, it's like it's possible to stitch together ways of making money. I mean, because even at the top level journalism, no one's getting paid very much, and I feel like until really recently, every journalist I know secretly wanted to be writing for TV. And then, like, the writer's strike happened, and it suddenly became clear that, like, that's also not a very good job anymore, which changed kind of quickly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like the cliche, like, don't do it unless you can't imagine doing anything else, which I think is valid. It's like, it's probably why we're all here. There are a lot of other things I could be doing, but I just really wanted to do this, and I just continued to try, and I've been really lucky in a lot of ways. A lot of it is about luck, but it's also, you know, just keeping at it if you know it's the thing that you want to do, which doesn't sound easy, but that's all I got.
I guess there's a point where a friend of mine described me as like, you've done a lot of random shit.
Would you?
Right? I think like at this point I just feel like one of those like sewer rats who manages to like run around and collect enough food. and this idea of like making a long-term plan about something, I don't even know how to think that way.
Survival skills, though.
It's just yeah. I definitely like every 10 years I have this moment of like I would never have guessed that I'd be doing this 10 years ago.
Well, I was just going to ask, we all think that we're going to have our jobs or be in our industry in 10 years.
But that's like, what kind of a question is that? Like, I don't know.
In your perfect world, what would it look like in 10 years?
Right.
And
I work at a place, we work at places where people work for like 40 years often. I mean, maybe increasingly less now, but like, I don't know if that's going to be a possibility for us. I don't know if we really want that, but do we all? I don't. Oh my God, if I'm still at the New York Times in 10 years.
Well, did you say you graduated from high school? Did you say 2008?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's the year I got the job I have now. So like, it's already been a while.
Wait, so when did you get to the Times?
2002.
You great again.
So I wanted to build on the kind of like the insight tea and the lessons. There are a lot of people in the room. We're a newer publication. Like, what's the one thing? Like, if you could give us like the one thing we should do. Like, what's the one thing that's going to really push us over the edge and make us fail tomorrow? Like cautionary. What's your cautionary tale?
Wait, can I ask about the business model?
You can ask Paul.
The model's completely what you left out, nonprofit.
Subscriber, nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Okay.
And that's 400 new nonprofit news outlets in the country.
Right.
And the idea is that if something's valuable, it doesn't necessarily have to create a profit or something.
Well, are we talking about a small number of donors, large number, more for crowdfunding?
First model more.
Okay.
Yeah. So that being said, like, what are the big pitfalls editorially only? Like, what are some of the lessons as a writer that you feel could tank anybody trying to do this work today, trying to just get people going?
I don't know whether it's about whether or not to tank you, but I feel like just like a small lesson I learned, and this is really maybe specific to food journalism, or maybe it's all or criticism rather, is it builds off the idea of like only writing about things that you're really passionate about and that you really have something to say about. I think that it took me a long time to learn that you need to learn to listen to yourself, like, and you can give up on things if you're finding that something you're writing is, there's a difference between something being too hard or challenging in a way that you can push through, and it's challenging because it's pushing you to grow. And then there's something being too hard because you just don't have anything to say. And part of that for me in terms of reviewing restaurants was realizing that sometimes I would not write about a restaurant, not because it was really bad, but because it was not good enough or bad enough, and I didn't have anything to say about it. Sometimes things just land in the middle, and it's not interesting for you, and it's not interesting for someone to read about. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to start every single thing you finish, and also don't touch fuzzy. It wasn't dead. Like I had found it on some, it was newly opened. I found it on some website that, was cataloging openings. And I went and I didn't like it. And I gave it a negative review. And I was like, why am I telling people not to go to a restaurant that they weren't going to go to otherwise? Which seemed kind of obvious, but you're a curator in addition to being a critic. Like you're helping people. So now I my role was kind of I'll give a negative review of a place that's getting a ton of attention, and I feel like, as you said, it's service journalism. If everyone's hearing about this place, and it's a big splashy chef, and it's really expensive, and I think it's terrible, I feel like I have an obligation to tell people don't waste your money on this experience. Or if I find somewhere that's not getting a lot of attention and it's really special, then amplify a place like that. So, yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that's changed in my many centuries in this industry is that like voice matters more than ever. Like the sort of the older idea of like, oh, we're gonna have different departments and we're gonna cover all this stuff and it's gonna be written in the voice of an institution. Like personal voice seems to matter more than ever. I bet you there are people where when they re-up their Times subscription, they're thinking about Jasmine, they're thinking about a few other people that they really love. And I think most subscriptions that succeed do this on the basis of having a few voices that are really resonating, and it might be different people for different readers, but like that seems like the most important thing, and that seems like what drives the publications that feel the most exciting. You have advice?
I guess like the cautionary tales that I've seen, the ones that make me the most sad would be the ones that are mostly about like watching people's real ambitions get really thwarted. I mean, like back when I was a science fiction novelist, the person who signed the like 6-book deal and then around book 3 decided they didn't really want to do it anymore, and they're trapped. And I never envied them. They had a lot of money up front and then about 15 really miserable years. And I've seen it in the music industry as well. There's a point where fame comes knocking and that door opens, and it's not something that I think people should actually walk through. They should look really hard before they decide if they really want to do something with it. There's a lot to be said for taking something step by step and year by year instead of writing down everything as far as you can, and having these ideas about where you want to be in 25 years. That's been most of the cautionary tales. It's less about the danger of success, or danger of failure than the danger of success.
So I want to ask a question, and then I want to take some questions from y'all. I want to have a mind to ask them. Is that a good idea? So, I'm always thinking about the future. I'm always thinking about Afrofuturism, but the future. I'm always thinking about the future, and you might be reluctant to answer. But what is the biggest dream that you have for yourself in your career? Where do you see yourself? What is it? What does that look like? Have you given yourself opportunity to dream a bigger dream for yourself?
I want to be in the View. I realized last night. Amazing on the View.
You have
sold out. And in that movie, I was subbing for her. And that's why I think I'd be amazing on the View.
Did you mention it?
Please, don't tell me. I text her all the time, she never responds. Anyway, I don't know. I'm at a really weird inflection point in my career where I'm kind of having that existential crisis. I'm like, hey, what should I do? I don't know. I'm not going to do either of those things. So you can tell my mother I'm not going to have a baby or die. But working at a place like the New York Times, I've worked there since I was 23. I've been there for 8.5 years, and so it's really, it's the best place in the world to get comfortable and to, in my particular case, get sort of lazy, right? Like, it'd be so easy to just coast through the next, like, 20 years of my career, like, writing my little stories, getting paid my little journalist salary, having my health insurance, and being perfectly fine. But what I've been trying to do as of late, especially after I launched this very nice award I had to bring up, is figure out, like, what do I actually want to do? You know, like, what is the next thing I want to challenge myself at? And I joke about being on The View. Like I said, I love money, so I am genuinely interested in who knows me on The View. But it's sort of the same thing we're talking about, right? Like, having a job that still is responding to the culture, responding to the news, or just responding to sort of a national attitude. Like, that is a position that I feel incredibly lucky to have been in, particularly at such a young age, and have a place like the New York Times. But I don't know. I think that I always want to be writing magazine stories. It's my favorite thing in the entire world when stuff starts to sing. But I think in reality, it's good for people to do different things. Like, I think it's so cool that we've had a million different jobs. You know how many jobs I've had? One. The New York Times, and it's been great. But I think I think you probably bring so many more perspectives and experiences.
Oh yeah, I'm not complaining.
Stuff. So I'm complaining. I think that's so important, and I think that's so important for every writer. And so, if anybody has any ideas what I should be doing, please come back here after talking.
I don't know. I mean, the future of magazines and newspapers definitely feels uncertain to me. The New Yorker is probably, other than the Times, the most stable, general interest news magazine in this country. But you know, it's owned by Condé Nast, which is a company that seems to be bleeding money. Along with the rest of the industry. I don't know what's going to happen. It's such a beloved publication. I hope it stays around forever, but editors come and go, writers come and go. I really haven't thought about the future of my career. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing right now. I think I'll always write in some capacity, but I could also imagine, I know a lot about restaurants. Sometimes I think someone should hire me as a restaurant consultant, which a lot of restaurant, I think, food writers end up doing, but I do feel like I probably have an inflated sense of my own ability to guide a restaurateur in how to make a successful place. And I think I picked up some patterns along the way. And I don't know. I think I'll always write in some capacity, but I think I may be even more interested in staying in the food space in some way. And there seems to be there's all this interesting stuff happening. Like, I'm very interested in the idea of food waste and recycling and composting, and I feel like I could imagine myself shifting to something like that someday. But for now, I'm keep on writing for the magazine as long as well happens.
I mean, I think it's important to remember that something like a magazine job is like really a bundle of jobs, right? Yeah. It's about creating sentences, and it's about reporting, and it's about making arguments, and it's about having conversations, and it's about telling stories, and so any one of those things can go in a different direction, and can lead to other things, and even different journalism jobs are going to be slightly different bundles, right? It's just the magazine bundle is the one we're in, and I think all of us feel like there's parts of that bundle that we're better at and parts that we're not as good at. I think one of the keys to having a successful career is to really figure out the things that you're the best at and really lean into that and put yourself in a position where you can do the most of the particular part of the job that you're the best at. So yes, in a general sense, my career has gotten a little more miscellaneous over the years, and I hope it keeps getting more miscellaneous in terms of working at the magazine, wrote a book, a TV gig now, and there's lots, there's different parts. CBS Sunday Morning.
Oh,
You're talking
I
about.
want to be on the
I'm
view.
a contributor.
Actually, what I really want to do is be a judge on Top Chef.
You guys know anybody? Good idea.
I'll just be it.
We just forgot you guys were here. We're just having a little
I want to
brainstorming
be on
session.
TV, yeah.
The ideas that I have for myself are mostly the ones that seem to be getting handed to me now, which is that I think the culture is mostly about things that people younger than me are creating. You know, people under 30, people under 35, and I'm almost 50. And I think that the most interesting avenue for me is the survival skills that we talked about are things that younger people seem to want from me. And I'm interested in passing those along and helping them make the things that they want to make. And teaching them what little I think I know about how things work. And so hopefully maybe I think that that's the way culture should work. You pass along the things to younger people so they do it better than you do. And to the extent that I see younger musicians and younger writers and younger artists making things that are better than anything that any of my peers made at the same age, I feel like that's a success. And it's really gratifying in ways that I hadn't anticipated, to be able to help people do that. So that's
And
the
so
vision.
we have The View, CBS, and Top Chef. And so you get into American Idol.
Sewer rat.
So National Geographic.
There's no this.
It's like National Geographic, American Idol. I can see the voice.
I just want to say that I think what you said is so important, and I benefited from that. So from people like you, as a kid and a teenager in New Haven, taking young people seriously as creators of things is so important, and it doesn't happen everywhere.
And invigorating.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, well,
It
that's
works.
so great to
It
hear.
goes both
But
ways.
you think we can see it, right? You do, but you're not from New England. So Jasmine and I don't know. I think about this all the time. I was taken so seriously, and I was taken very seriously by Paul Bass, because I was an intern at the Advocate, and I wrote my first restaurant review in the Advocate. I was 15, and it was not let's let this kid try this thing out. It was you work here now, go. And you were saying I went and covered Green Party candidates for whatever. I remember going to some meeting at a senior citizens. I don't know. It's all. I guess are there still archives for the Advocate? My grandmother had a. But anyway, yeah. I feel like that's just the most valuable work, and I don't think I would have the job I have now if I hadn't.
I mean, I benefited myself, for sure.
Yeah.
In my 20s and 30s, I'm totally grateful to the people older than me who, there's a steady string of them who, drop some real gems
Yeah.
right when they needed to be dropped.
Yeah.
So.
So, let me take a couple of questions. I think what I'd like to, a couple of questions and then give you all time to just be together in fellowship. Because I think, I think it's important that, we spend the whole time doing this and that y'all gather a little bit in fellowship. So, does anybody please stand up and say who you are and ask your question with abundance.
With abundance. Tom gets it correct. Actually, my question is for Jasmine. You do a thing called Writers of Color. And it has been, and you use that platform to kind of push outlets into providing opportunities for writers of color, but also in terms of pushing outlets to be transparent around pay and how they're going to compensate for jobs that they're advertising. And I'm curious as to how you feel like, how impactful has that been? And in this particular world of the review writer, how has that, have you seen any shifts in terms of what people are putting out there for these types of opportunities? And are you seeing any impact in terms of the way outlets are compensating writers for this type of work?
So Writers of Color is a project that a couple of friends and I started in 2016 when I was an editor at the Times Magazine then, and I had a bunch of friends who were editors and writers, and I just kept hearing over and over again, like, well, we would love to assign a story to a person of color, but we should know where to find. We don't know where to find any. So I came up with the not so brilliant idea to have a bunch of writers just put all their contact information in a publicly available Google Doc, and then a much smarter person came along and said, no, that's a gift for the racists. We made it into a website that like editors could go through and say, like, I'm looking for a person to write this sort of thing, and then we could set them up. And the project has like totally fallen into disarray. I'm going to pretend that I'm still active on it now. We have a very active Twitter account, which is mostly turned into a job sport, which I do feel really happy about. Because oftentimes when publications or editors are looking to assign certain stories and are opening their inboxes to pitches or even for job opportunities, they'll now just like tag us for a bunch of other people and we can post it. It's so great. This is a whole other panel, but we can talk about like the way that the publishing industry looks, which is getting more diverse by the day. I mean, after nearly 9 years at the Times, like I can tell a palpable difference in like who's in the building now. However, people who are in the building are not always the ones doing the writing. They're not always making the assigning. Like, you know, there's so many people. I think the team of people with whom I made Writers of Color, like our goal was truly to say like, we never want to hear another editor say, I can't find anybody ever again, right? And I think of it to a certain extent, but it's really about like making editors care, right? And as someone who's an editor for 5 years, like I don't think that most editors who are maybe just assigning the same sorts of stories to the same sort of people who share the same identity, I don't think that they're nefarious at all. I think they're stressed and they're overworked and they're underpaid. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier, and I think that, honestly, I think it's a pretty solid drop in the bucket, but sadly probably didn't change too much. But to your point, Lisa, I think that pay transparency is really important. And one thing that the Twitter account does, I don't find it one of the things I started with is like, it's just kind of bullying editors and publications who don't say how much money they're going to pay, because like, this is our job. Like we've talked about how sometimes, again, if I were to start writing now, I would have a day job. But like, it's completely fine to want to get a staff job. What it's not fine is to like go through the process and not have any information as to what sort of money you're going to make for a publication to create a role that is 4 different jobs in one, and the person's only making $65,000 a year. I think there needs to be a massive sea change in subscriber models and advertising models and everything for the salaries to increase to the way that I think we all would like them to be. But I do think that we've helped bring like pay transparency a little more to the forefront in certain corners of Twitter. Though I don't know. I look at a project sometimes and I see so much more that we could have done, and I sort of forget that we have done for things, but there's always more.
That's it.
How do you feel AI is going to change your job within the time frame? I've heard it's not 5 to 10 years, it's like 6 months to 1 year when some people feel the changes are really going to be felt.
That's why I'm trying to get on the new.
New AI comes a little later than time. I mean, AI can already write a terrible story, and so can I. No, I mean, I think it's, it reminds me of things that happen like in the world of music. Like some of these conversations are like, when people are talking about like drum machines and synths and MIDI technology and like what's going to happen to orchestras.
Conversation in like 1975.
Right.
It turns out the only musician that AI has put out of business is keyboard players.
Well, I'm sure if you looked around, right? Like you looked around technologically, like maybe there's fewer trombone players than there used to be in America, right? I mean,
yeah,
you might
that has its
find
own reasons.
Sure.
But I will say, Brian, that we've seen, like, they've taken Rihanna's voice and had her sing a Beyonce song, and it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there, right? And they have, these artists have no recourse to get this pulled back or to even stop it on some level.
Yeah, that feels less like an AI problem than like a good old intellectual property theft problem. Like that's like a 19th century problem. Yeah, like it's the thing that you settle with like a good old neighbor dispute. Like, I mean, look, like as a musician, I think that we should push AI further. I would like to see the first totally virtual AI pop star who has like a 13-octave vocal range.
But as a journalist, like
you said you don't write sci-fi anymore.
It seems like if it becomes more important for people to feel like a person wrote something, then like that's an interesting like aesthetic question of like, well, what does that feel like? What is it about something that we do that makes it feel like it came from a person?
I mean,
that's the valuable thing.
Totally, and a lot of the questions is interviewing, right? Like, I'll worry about AI when AI can interview somebody on the street corner in the rain. Until then, I'm not really that worried.
Careful. You have a question?
I have a question whenever people are done weighing in on AI. Sounds like maybe now. Could each of you briefly tell us about an article you've recently written that you are proud of and thought did the arts and culture writing thing well? Maybe Brian first.
Maybe not me first. Somebody quick.
Hannah just had a big story come out.
Oh, tell us about it, Hannah.
A profile that I'm pretty proud of it. It was only the second feature-length story I've done for the magazine, and the last one was 5 years ago. And it's a profile of a chef named Kwame Onwuachi, who has a restaurant in Lincoln Center called Tatiana, which is a fine dining restaurant that serves basically food inspired by his own life. He grew up in the Bronx, and his mother is from Louisiana, from a Creole family. His father's Nigerian and Jamaican, and so he serves a very kind of eclectic Afro-Caribbean cuisine that's really personal to him. And the restaurant's really, really good. And speaking of Pete Wells, again, he put out a list of the best 100 restaurants in New York, and he put Tatiana as #1, which was a big surprise, I think, for him as much as for anyone else, for Kwame. And so I spent 6 weeks following him around and tried to capture what he's doing. One of the things that he does is puts on a food festival every summer called the Family Reunion in Middleburg, Virginia, and I got to go to that, and it was the most incredible thing. It was just 4 days of, as Jasmine described it, gluttony, with just food from chefs from all over the country who he has personal relationships with, and demonstrations about jerk and barbecue, and these pit masters drove their smokers up from Georgia. It was really cool. Someone should write about that for the review crew, because I feel like you can get a press pass, and there's so many stories to be told even within that festival. And yeah, so it was really hard. I spent the last 5 years writing very short weekly restaurant reviews, and I kind of felt like, I don't know how to do this, I can't do this. And it was using a whole different part of my brain, a different set of muscles. But it was a good lesson for me, because I kind of, the last time I did it was so hard, I was I'm never doing that again. I only write short things. And then with a few years under my belt and some encouragement, I figured out how to do it, and I think that's a good lesson for any writer that like it's hard to do something new, even if you're super experienced writing. A format change can be really challenging, but I feel so glad that I did it. I feel so much more confident now that I can do it again. Whereas literally the last time I was like, I will never do this again. I had a baby the day that it came out, and I was like, having this baby was so much easier. I still feel that. And we're learning.
Let's see. I mean, I always like expanding the idea of like what it means to do arts criticism. So if you even think of it that way. So like last year, I had fun profiling this stand-up comic named Shane Gillis, who's like kind of a somewhat controversial, button-pushing, I think, kind of really brilliant guy. And to talk about form like stand-up or a guy like Shane. In this sort of like highbrow New Yorker way is a lot of fun. But sometimes it's like the stuff that's not as hard work. I'm a big fight fan, but I only like real fights. I don't really like fights in the movies. And at some point I realized I had never seen a Rocky movie. I was like, that seems weird. So I did a piece where I watched all 9 Rocky movies and recorded my reaction to them. And that's a kind of like, that's a kind of arts journalism that's like cheap. And if that matters to anyone here, and doable, but I think is interesting to readers and kind of like intersect with something that's happening in popular culture.
Last year, I wrote this story in Viola Davis as she was communicating, and as a writer, I'm pretty confident in saying that I hate writing, right? That's the worst part of the process. Reporting is my second favorite, but the research part is where I really like to relish and spend a lot of time in. So when I got the Viola Davis story, I had like a week to prepare, and so I just shut myself in my house and I watched pretty much everything she would have been in. I could watch like most of How to Get Away with Murder, but I was just watching all this stuff. It was so fun and fulfilling, but also, because she was such a familiar character, and her face was like such a familiar size, like a tiny size on my tiny TV, that when I met her in real life, I was like, oh my god. But what I liked about that story is that ostensibly it was about the woman who came to pay to the film, but it was like maybe the first story I had done with someone with such a long career, and I really got to spend time with them. Like Viola started showing her Juilliard, and she worked in New York theater for a really long time. Then they got this small role, this small role, this small role. And in some ways, through telling her story, I felt as if I could touch on the path that many actors have to take, the ways in which we talk about or even accept or hire darker-skinned people to be on TV, the sorts of roles that they take up, and how she's seen that how she's seen that change. In 2000, when she was on some big role on a soap opera, she would have never imagined, for so many reasons, that she would end up being the lead character in a primetime network drama. And so I really liked being able to tell sort of not a history of entertainment, but chronicling the shifts of how we hire and what we look for in TV and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. It was an interesting juxtaposition to the last time she was in the New York Times, in which I think a critic called her not a classic beauty or something. You know what I'm talking about. And I got to ask her about that and be like, you got to this place where you did do the big, crazy, totally beyond your wildest dreams thing, which is that you start on this TV show and then you still get the shit with the biggest newspaper in the entire world. How does that make you feel? But it was, I felt like I did get to really understand those sorts of shifts through a particular person's career, as opposed to just reading about TV trends.
I always my favorite pieces are the ones where I get to report on somebody who's really doing the work. I think that a lot of a lot of like questions about culture and the arts feel like these like discussions, like we're talking about the thing, and I love like being able to report on people just doing it. And so for people who don't live in New Haven, there's this large thing that happens every October called Citywide Open Studios that was organized by a place called Artspace for years, and it was like super popular, and a ton of visual artists took part in it, and a lot of people showed up to see the work. It was really popular, and everyone loved it. And like, very long story short, that organization included, and the artists decided to organize Citywide Open Studios for themselves. And it has been a real pleasure figuring out how to document the work of like actually trying to organize this thing, and then it's going on for the next couple of weeks, and there's this very like sort of kindergarten level question of will it work that I think is like really fascinating and isn't about like grading your performance. It's so much to the extent that we've been talking about these large questions, like this is a real cool microcosm of what happens when the industry implodes, and you have to people just have to make something for themselves. How do you go about doing that? How do you get the message out? Who shows up? Who hears it? Who shows up in response to it? And it's very cool to be able to talk about this question in real time, and to be able to say something about not like hypothetical, maybe we can try this or try that, but hey, some people try it, and here's what it looks like. And like that feels very valuable to me. It's ongoing.
We have one last question. Oh, okay. Maya, and then Tulsa can have the last question.
I am an education reporter for The Independent, so I kind of often tell folks that like I really enjoy hyper-local reporting and just like having a person who hangs out at the corner store all day be my like sole source for things. Like I just love being integrated in the community. So my question, I guess, is kind of, I'm wondering if you guys along your journeys have ever kind of worked through feelings or just thoughts of becoming more distanced from the community or from a community. And yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but it just, has that been something you've had to work through, or just general thoughts around having that thought where it's like, I'm afraid to have to move up to like some high thing where I won't be like able to be in my neighborhood or in my community and really just get to know folks that way?
I mean, those connections and that point of view is one of the most valuable things you have as you move up, right? Like, editors are always looking for people that like have a sense of something that they don't know about, right? That know about stuff that's going on that's not in the news, that talk to people that aren't necessarily getting those interviews. So I think that's a great asset, and I think that as you move up, that'll only seem more important. Not just specifically those people, but that ability to talk to people. Because the people that are assigning us stories and editing our stories don't do a lot of that.
No.
And so, whether it's that they affirmatively appreciate that we do a lot of that sometimes, or whether it's that they feel like a little bit intimidated and they're like, oh, I better let that person tell the story. They seem to know about some stuff. It can work either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a huge part of what being a good reporter is at any level, is like recognizing that there is no, like, you don't get distanced from it. I mean, I hear what you're saying, like you're telling different stories or maybe telling bigger stories, but when you're reporting, you're just talking to people. That's like, and I have felt like in the job I was doing until recently, that's so much of what I was doing and why I liked it so much is, I mean, sometimes I was going to a restaurant anonymously and just writing about what I was eating and trying to take that perspective, but sometimes I would do it, especially post and during the pandemic, I would focus more on telling the story of a small business owner, and I would get really into the nitty gritty of that and spend time on the phone and at the businesses, and that felt more like local reporting, just trying to cover all of the boroughs of New York City, which is hard. but yeah, but I think like you're not doing a good job if you're not really connecting with people when you're reporting.
All right, come on, Tulsa.
I'm Ryan from Tulsa. My question is, what do you do with your unpublished work? Is it something you put on your personal pages, or is it something where you're just so programmatic about, like, hey, I'm not going to start my story until my pitch is accepted?
I don't have any unpublished work because I only write. I got it in my head that I don't write for free. I was going to stop keeping it diary. I really wish that I did though, and that's, you know, in talking about my slow burning existential crisis, that's something that I want to do more of. But I think like it depends what you want your outcome to be, right? Like if you are in a position where you're trying to get assignments or get a job or whatever, I think it's a good idea to have a work be found publicly, right? Or at least people are able to interact with it. But I also think it's important to have writing that's just for you, writing that you like can sort of tend to check in on and everything. Because it's, I think, especially when writing is your day job, when it's your bread and butter, it's like, you know, we all become writers because we love writing in like elementary school or middle school or whatever. Like, very few people, I think, like stumble into journalism because it's such a hard thing. So I think like it's important to keep writing for yourself to maintain that same initial relationship we had to writing, where it was exciting and you were totally in charge and you did explore so much about yourself and your interests and your capabilities through that writing. So I think it's important to have a secret that's just for you, or just for you and your loved one, or just for you and your editor. And I think it's fun to have that sort of thing because yeah, it can grow and change. You can have something, you're like, I really need to get this out, and a year later you're like, oh, I need to like plug something into this bigger story that I'm working on and pull from the thing that I've previously written. I don't do that, but I would.
But also, if it's really good, publish it yourself. Like, I think it's, you know, in terms of getting gigs, like an editor is going to like look you up and is going to read what 2 things you wrote?
Yeah.
2.5 maybe?
And they'll read something that's on Medium.
Yes.
Or whatever, right? Like something that you publish yourself.
So it's important that you have whatever the 2 or 3 best things that you are most proud of. It's important that those things be out there and be accessible. That said, I'm like Jasmine. I mean, the idea that I would ever get my shit together to finish something if there wasn't like a deadline is crazy to me. So I have unpublished notes, but I don't have
Yeah, I mean, when you're on staff at magazine, you're not running anything on spec. I mean, there are things that get killed. Definitely had stories killed, and then I just buried that with the rest of my shame. There's one thing I wrote something that I think it was like, I tried to submit it to the website, and then it was like too late for like the thing that it was about, and so I did publish it, and I had like a Tumblr, and I published it on my Tumblr.
First, I'm going to like your negative restaurant review, but then I'm going to look at that. I'm not the only one.
I'll find it. I think I deleted it. What was I going to say? I was going to say, I feel like there's like the Tumblr of today or the Medium is more like Substack, and I think that's why that's become a whole thing. Like, if your question is like, how do you get your stuff out there if you feel like you can't get it published? I do think that's become the medium for self-publishing, and a lot of people seem to have a lot of success with it. I find it hard as a reader because I'm like, I can't afford all of these subs. It's like, and then I've seen this, you know, people joke about this.
They'll give you a comment.
But it's like, but I've seen like the logical things like, well, what if we combine all the Substacks together and we pay one fee per month, and then it's like, wait, that's a magazine. But anyway, but I do think like, I've seen people have a lot of success with that. And there's a woman that we probably all know who has an email newsletter that is free, and
Yeah, I'm not sure why she does that. She's great, just for fun.
Yeah.
She doesn't make any money off of it, but it's like an invite-only email newsletter about fashion. It's just like in the body of an email. She has.
In addition to her job as the style critic
Yeah, she's
at the Washington Post.
And I think she has like thousands of subscribers, right? I mean, she's a self-promoter.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's the internet is like, you can get people to read your review, and it's just your friends and family.
I mean, this is taking a page from the world of fiction, which has a much higher ratio of unpublished stuff. There's a, I think, I mean, at least speaking for myself, like I tend not to worry about that stuff. I write all the time, and you know, some of it sees the light of day and some of it doesn't. And what's cool about that is that I have found over the years that whatever I liked or whatever was actually good about the stuff that didn't get published has a way of resurfacing in another form. Like the things that matter, like you find another home for them. And it's to the point where I think of most of the writing is like rough drafts for something better. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that, you know, because you know as long as you're still paying your rent, it's okay to have stuff that hasn't been published. You know, what was good will come out in some way or another.
Well, thank you.
Hey.